Welcome to episode number 49 and another installment of Direct Connections. Returning to the show to talk Mopars with me for the third time is our friend Jonny Mopar. When Jonny and I talk Mopars, we have a good time, and sometimes we get a little amped up, so please know that there is some colorful language in this episode that may be unsuitable for younger listeners or those sensitive to bad words. So without further ado, if you are a Mopar enthusiast, then you are in the right place. Don't go anywhere. You're tuned into the best Mopar enthusiast-driven podcast on planet Earth, and I'm your host, Chris Albrecht, better known as the Mopar Hunter, and this is Talking Mopars, Direct Connections.
You're listening to Talking Mopars with the Mopar Hunter, your direct connection to all things Mopar.
Ladies and gentlemen, once again for Direct Connections, we have our friend Jonny Mopar. This is the third time Johnny's been on the show. Jonny, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show, buddy. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good, Chris. And yourself?
I'm doing great, man. You know, just hanging in there. We got wildfires all over the West Coast right now, so
Yes.
air quality is poor. But in the old studio here, we're doing okay. So
Right on.
perfect for an episode of Talking Mopars, Direct Connections with Jonny Mopar once again. Now, Jonny, you and I were just talking off air about the Ram Chargers and something unique about them that I didn't know about. Tell us about that.
So probably about 11 years ago when I bought my Duster, this guy he re-chromed bumpers, and he was up in the high desert area down here in Southern California. Anyway, I took my Roadrunner bumpers, my Coronet bumpers, and my 72 Charger bumpers to him to get re-chromed. And then, long story short, we were BSing. He had a Duster there that was just a shell. I won't get into that story. We'll save that for another time. But I bought this Duster off of him. But something else, he had a lot of cool stuff. He had like Hemi Roadrunners and GTXs. Like, this guy had the bomb stuff, the good stuff, right?
Where does he live?
High desert. I think it was I think that was Palmdale. Somewhere up around there. But he had a lot of cool stuff, tons and tons of stuff, and a lot of restored cars, like really nice high dollar stuff. Yeah. He had a 340 Barracuda Formula S you would have liked.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And over in the corner he had a Ram Charger. Now, I think I don't remember it correctly because I thought it was a 79, and this Ram Charger is a pop top. They call them pop top Ram Chargers, but they're called half doors. They're called pillarless. Basically, the door frame, instead of going all the way around the door glass, it's not. There is no frame around the door glass. That top half, basically the top of the door frame and the back portion, that it almost looks like somebody did it out of their garage. Like they cut it off of the door and then welded it into the roof of the removable top for the Ram Chargers. So basically, when you pull the top off of these things, it looks like a convertible. It just has the windshield, the little wing window, and then there is no door frame around it. It's just wide open all the way through the truck.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. Yeah, he was telling me how rare these things were, and I thought, man, I was like, well, I've never seen one. It was a pretty cool thing to see. And then, when we talk, we've come up with a couple of trivia things, and I thought, man, that's a cool thing to talk about. I had thought of it, so I wrote it down in my phone. And then I think last time we talked, we were talking about doing the tin grills, or maybe we were talking about trucks. I don't know what it was, but I was thinking, okay, I want to talk about this next time we talk. And then this guy, Patrick Grissom, he posted a 79 Dodge Ram Charger, but the thing was a two-wheel drive, like dropped really low, and it had no door frames. And I thought, oh, it's because I had never seen one of these trucks in real life other than this one, the guy I got the Duster from, and I'd never seen one even on Facebook until this guy posted his. So of course I hit him up like, you got to tell me about these things, because I was thinking, was it low production? They do it certain years or whatever, because I had thought it was a 79 that I had seen, and then seeing his, which was a 79, and then I went online and I was trying to look at pictures, and you see some with 73 grills, 72, 73 grills. It's kind of all over the map, but you know how easy it is for those trucks to swap grills around on.
Oh
You
yeah.
could kind of have whatever you want. So I hit him up, and he claims he's not much of an expert on them, but this guy knows way more than I do, and I think he had 3 of them, so he knows quite a bit. But he was telling me that they made those trucks. It was a 74 only, and it was from January to May is the only time they made those trucks. So if you see one that's got a grill other than a 74 grill, it's been re-grilled basically. But
Interesting.
yeah, pretty awesome truck. And the reason I wanted to talk about the tin grills, we talked last time. You were talking about how wide the Mopar, genre is, from turbo 4 cylinders to cars from the 50s and the max wedges, and you want to hit on every one of these sort of subculture genres of Mopar,
Yeah.
and I think the Dodge trucks are probably one of the most unappreciated trucks as far as the general population, as far as people out there, like C10s, F100s. They've gotten really popular. Even the swept lines, it seems like the swept lines have gotten really popular. I mean, in my day, those were the ugly ducklings. Like, nobody would touch a swept line. You could get
Yeah.
those trucks all day long for $100 or less, and the tin grills, they just still haven't really come into the spotlight, in my opinion. I mean, there's definitely a subculture out there where you and I are on the tin grill group, and it's like these guys are all hardcore and they love the trucks, of course, but as far as the general public, it still has yet to, the light has yet to be shone on them. But so anyway, I thought, how cool would it be to talk about the tin grills? And I have a tin grill story, so
Awesome.
figured
Yeah, man.
talk about that Ram Charger rareness, and then
Yeah.
get into my Power Wagon.
Yeah, the thing about Dodge trucks that I've come to realize is that compared to Chevys and Fords, the production numbers were just so much lower. And I think that has a lot to do with it because, I mean, for every 10 F100s or F150s or, Chevy C10s or S10s, you see one Dodge, as far as tin grills and even the plastic grills.
Would you
but
say
they
that?
call the first gens.
Yeah. Would you say that? Are you saying that today, like for every 10 C10s you see one tin grill in today's time?
Yeah, and I would actually bet on if you looked at the production numbers for, let's just say, the 1970s. From at least for tin grills, it would be 72 to 80. I think if you compared that to the Chevy production numbers or even the Ford production numbers, I bet you there were, I mean, tens of
Quite a bit lower.
thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands less. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it has a lot to do with availability, to be honest.
It's hard to say because I think you're probably right, because just when you look at the muscle cars themselves, I mean, I think they made so much fewer Mopars than Chevys and Fords in general. But I mean, and I definitely agree with you today. If you even see a tin grill,
Oh, yeah.
like you'll see 10 C10s and another F1, another 10 F100s before you see another tin grill. But as a kid, dude, I could tell you, like, you couldn't drive a block without seeing a tin grill parked somewhere in somebody's driveway or in front of the house. And I mean, I would say probably your older school guys, like my age and older, probably remember them. But yeah, like my grandpa had one. My neighbors, my friends' parents had one. And yeah, they were everywhere. But I'll tell you, like, when I started really getting into Mopars and carrying, like I never really got into the numbers or the rare stuff per se. I just never had one, and I never expected to afford one, because they were already starting to go up in value in the 90s. So they were always out of reach. It's like the more money I made, the more expensive they got. And I just could never really get to them.
Sure.
But I distinctly remember driving through Riverside one day and seeing a Spirit of 76 tin
Oh,
grill. Yeah, so it was cool. So I knew the truck, I knew they existed, and I thought, "Oh man, that is cool." But dude, this truck was a landscaper's truck, and this truck was put through the ringer like 2 or 3 times. I mean, it was hammered.
wow.
There was not a straight panel on this truck all the way around it. It was just dented, dinged, bent, scraped. I mean, it was hammered. And that is very typical what I remember as a kid too. Like Dodge trucks were work trucks. Nobody drove them because it was like, hey, I mean, there was probably a few guys, but most of them were like, I bought this truck to put to work. Nobody bought them to like, make them look pretty and lower them, or, maybe raise them, they just, yeah, there was few customizations that I remember as a kid. They were all just work trucks. And I think that carried through all the way through the 90s and stuff. So, maybe in the 90s you started seeing guys kind of retro, like, yeah, that's cool. Let me fix it up, But, you
Yeah,
know,
well, the one big problem I've seen in the tin grill community, and everybody who owns one can attest to this, and that's that the aftermarket support just isn't there. And that's another reason
absolutely.
why I believe that the production numbers were just so astronomically higher for Fords and Chevys, that that is one of the reasons why, is because so
Yeah.
many people have those trucks versus tin grills or other Dodge trucks that, the demand for the parts just wasn't there. But
Yeah.
eventually they caught back on, at least with even people that are outside the Mopar scene are starting to get into the Mopars just because of the trucks. I've seen, plenty
Yeah.
of people that their first Mopar is a truck, which I think is cool.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
swept lines, they've been getting really popular on the show circuit. And
Yeah.
I think tin grills are next. When you look at communities of C10 enthusiasts, they're huge.
Yeah.
And, I've been on the tin grill page for, gosh, 2 or 3 years, I think 3 years now. But I've
Yeah.
been watching that thing grow like crazy, and I'm like, oh, we're on to something here. This is gonna
Yeah.
be pretty cool. So yeah,
Yeah, I think all it needs is like a Chip Foose or a Ken Diggett, or like I would love to see the Martin brothers do
yeah,
a tin grill. Man, I mean, I like the way they build cars. So a slammed truck with big wheels, tucked and everything, with maybe like a Hellephant in it, be perfect.
well, it's funny you're talking about builders and stuff, because I've thought the Ring brothers, because they did
Mm,
that the AMC, I think it was a Javelin. They did the Javelin with the Hellcat in it,
hmm.
and it opened a lot of people's eyes to those AMCs. Unfortunately, those are even harder to find parts for
Yeah.
than tin grills. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Definitely.
But
And I think. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you're onto something there. I think that if more influential builders start getting their hands on these trucks, and because a lot of those guys are just, they're fabricators. So it
Yeah.
doesn't matter what's available on the aftermarket, they'll make it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just going to take one of those guys to build an off the wall tin grill to really blow everything up. And to that, I'll say, hey, everybody out there, get your tin grills now, because as soon as that scene blows up, the prices are going to go
Yep.
right up. So
Absolutely.
I'm glad I got mine. I'm holding on to it.
Yeah. I think the pivot point for the swept line was when Gas Monkey Garage did that one. They screwed it up with an LS motor, but and I'm sure that pissed off a lot of Mopar guys.
And they're
But the
sponsored by
truck,
Dodge. It's like, what are you
I
doing?
know,
What are you
right?
guys
I
doing?
don't know if he was sponsored back then. I mean,
Probably not.
it doesn't seem that long ago, but it was quite a while ago, and it seems to me like, just thinking back then, prior to that, swept lines were still not very mainstream or very popular. Nobody built them over the top, and then that happened, And it was like, now you started seeing swept lines pop up all over the place. And it's like, yeah, they're a very unique truck, and they really stand out in a car show. You're not going to have 10 swept lines lined up next to each other. You're probably going to be the only one, maybe there'll be another one that's bone stock or something.
Well,
But
now that Holly offers the swap kits for the tin grills for modern Hemis, that to me, you know, that says a lot about how the aftermarket is looking at those trucks, and I think they're testing the water. So
yeah,
if anybody's interested in that swap, go out there and buy those mount kits, because as soon as we show them that there is a demand, more parts are going to come out. So that's what I'm
yeah.
looking forward to.
And I don't know how everybody else comes down on this, but like I'm kind of an old school guy. Like for me, B bodies are really coveted to me, and I like the old motors in those cars. Like it's got to be a big block.
Yeah,
It's got to stay old school. I can't have a modern Hemi in that. If I had an E body, I would tolerate a modern Hemi in that more than I would a B body. So that's just me.
sure.
But when it comes to trucks, man, like they were never like, you're not going to get a truck with a Hemi in it or a six pack in it, and it's like that truck's coveted, and you can't do that modern or customization stuff. It's like, no, for me, it's sort of my release for customization. It's like, man, blank canvas when it comes to a tin grill. Like there is no sacrilege. You can't do anything to them and screw it up. Everything you're going to do to it is going to make it more awesome, more badass. And like the more custom you make it, the better. So it's like, if I had the money, yeah, I would totally put, I don't know if I'd be able to afford a elephant, but that'd be pretty nice. But I would put a modern Hemi in a drivetrain, or that drivetrain into an old tin grill, like no problem. I wouldn't have any trouble doing that.
Yeah, I know exactly where you're coming from when you talk about B bodies. I don't know why, but I kind of feel the same way. I would feel weird if I had like a, I don't know, 69 Super B and I was like, I'm going to put a modern Hemi in it. I would be weird about it. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd still do it. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but you know, there is that idea of, oh gosh, it would be cool to have a 440, six pack
Yeah.
in it or something. But, I said on a podcast or two ago, I forget exactly when I said it, but I talked about doing a modern iteration of a A12.
Hmm.
With a modern Hemi, but the six pack fuel injection.
Yeah.
I thought that would be pretty cool. But if I had, that would be for a car that wasn't numbers matching, or
Yeah.
was so far away from the original that an OE restoration on it would kind of be out of the picture. So
Yeah.
I would get crazy with something then, but I wouldn't butcher a real A12 with a with
No.
a modern Hemi or anything like that. But I get exactly what you're saying with the trucks. Trucks have always seemed that way, with the
Yeah.
sport trucks. And like, if you look at any of take Hot Rod magazine from the, we'll say, late 70s, early 80s, and take Truckin' magazine from the late 70s, early 80s, and you will see the stark differences between the two types of enthusiasts that build those vehicles. The trucks, it seems
Yeah.
like, it's always been an open, like you're saying, an open canvas. And it was the same
Yeah.
thing with vans. I had to sneak vans in there somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like, you look at the vans, and the interesting thing about vans, and I'll say this, and we'll get back to tin grills, is that the more I research the trends from back then, the more I realize that they were trying to blend two different worlds, because they got a lot of the custom truck stuff, like the crazy paint
Hmm.
jobs and things like that, and they blended it with the performance aspect of the muscle car stuff, because a lot of the criticism that vans were taking were that, well, they're not hot rods, they're vans.
Yeah.
But people were still building the 318s in them, or even, some of them even came with big blocks, which is cool. But
Yeah.
it's definitely interesting to see, because when I look at the late 70s or the mid to late 70s, and I look at some of the trucks from back then, they were kind of wild, when people
Yeah.
were customizing them. So
Yeah.
that's all I'll say about vans for now. We'll get back
All
to
right.
that later. So
Nice.
so tell us, Johnny, tell us about your first tin grill, your first foray into tin grills.
All right. Well, it goes back to the beginning. So I told you the story of my 68 Charger
Yes.
And how I spotted it riding the school bus and seeing the car roof line over a knoll, right? Well, I spotted this power wagon the same way. It wasn't as hidden as the Charger was, and it was closer to the street than the Charger was, but it was in some guy's backyard, and this guy was right on this main road that the school bus drove down. So I'm riding on the school bus, and I could see the truck plain as day. And it looks cool. The thing is lifted. It's got huge tires on it, 4x4, short bed. And it's like, man, that thing's awesome. So, and obviously this is close to where my parents live. So I graduate high school in 1990. I'm still living with my parents, and I'm driving by that truck all the time, and it's just like, I know there's a lot of guys that will relate to this. It's like a freaking worm that just gets implanted in your brain, and it just, like, every time you drive by, it's there, and it just eats at you. It eats at you. It eats at you. And eventually, like, I can't take it anymore. Even if the guy slams the door on my face and says no, at least right? Like, I can move on with life, and leave this behind me. So the truck was really cool looking, and I thought, man, it'd be cool to have a truck. And of course, it's got to be a Dodge. So I knock on the door one day. So this was probably around 1991, probably about a year after high school. I knock on the door and ask if it's for sale. And the truck had obviously been sitting there a few years, because I've seen it riding the school bus, and I was driving to high school when I was 17 or 16. So there's the school bus. I think I was a sophomore, and then when I was a junior, I was driving, and when I was a senior, I was driving, or at least halfway through the junior year. But so it'd been sitting a long time. Nothing's been happening to the truck. So it's not like they're driving it and there's probably something wrong with it. So I knock on the door, and I think it was an uncle's or something like that, and they had to check, and then I had to come back later, a few days later. Yeah, he'll sell it, but he wants $300 firm. Like, won't budge
firm
on the price. Firm
on the
right?
300. Okay.
This is 1991. $300 was worth a lot more money.
Sure.
You could buy a house with $300, Chris. I mean, come on. Just kidding. So $300. I can't even remember how I got this thing home. I think either my dad helped me. We threw a chain around it and drug it home, because it was a few miles, 2 or 3 miles from my parents' house, or maybe my buddy helped me. I don't remember. It's been so long ago, but and I didn't. Coming up with $300 back then was way harder than it is now, So it took me a while to have the money to do it.
Sure.
So, anyways, dragged this thing home and pulled it apart. Motor was dust. I had a friend of mine, his parents had some rental properties, and he's like, hey, we should all get together and rent a house together. So, like, 2 other friends and myself, we rented this house, and I'm like, I got to be able to bring my 68 Charger over to work on it, and the truck, so the truck was in the driveway, I'm working on it, and the car was in the garage, working on it here and there. I put this motor together, and I had bought a used 4-barrel intake manifold. Thought, oh man, this is cool. I don't remember what I paid for it, like $40 or $20, something. But somebody had, unfortunately for me, I think it was on a racing motor, and somebody had decked or surfaced the heads and changed the angle of the heads to the block. And then they cut the intake manifold to match, right? But, who knows who did it and when. When I bought this thing at a swap meet, it was like, there's no information on it. I didn't know there was any problem with the intake manifold, or that those angles had been changed. So I put this thing on the top of my motor that I just spent all this money rebuilding. Go to fire it up. It sounds bitchin' for a few seconds, and then it's like, this thing's running like crap, man. I mean, I'm like, what the hell? And the more throttle you give it, just sounds more and more sick. It would idle, but as soon as you give it throttle, it sounded awesome for a second, and then I'm like, what the hell?
Oh, man.
I couldn't couldn't understand it. You know, you're going through everything, the carburetor, the distributor, the plugs, like, it's like, what the hell's wrong with this thing? And I think I tried to start it again. It just wouldn't start anymore. It wouldn't run. Like, shit. So I think I just surrendered to the fact that I'm going to have to pull this motor apart. Like, something went wrong inside this engine. And first thing I did was I put a pan under it to drain the oil, and the oil was coming out like water. I mean, it was so thin, and you could just smell the gas, you know. And I'm like, oh, dude, how do you get gas in the crankcase, you know? So pull the carb, pull the intake, and then you can see, because it's a small block, it's got I had like the Felpro type gaskets on it. You could see the impressions where the intake was squishing against the head on the top of the gasket, and on the bottom, nothing. Like, they were just, it was so loose that gas, it was all wet with gas. Gas was down by the lifters. I mean, it was just, it was bad. And pulled the motor back out, pulled it apart, and all the pistons just had like all these melted lines on them, where the friction of the gasoline between the cylinders and the piston, it just melted into the piston. So it ruined the pistons. The cylinders were still good, you know. So luckily all my machine work was okay. So I had to buy a new set of pistons and rings, and I had to start all over on it, which, when you're broke and you're just starting off and you're not making very much money, that's a hell of a lesson to learn, you know.
Yeah.
But anyway, I put a 455 lift 340 cam in it, you know, purple shaft cam. Dude, I love those cams. Those cams are great for the street. And
I don't think I've ever heard a bad thing about the purple cams, to be honest.
No, this dude, I love that thing. When I fired that thing up after I fixed everything, oh man, it sounded like a freaking Top Fuel car. The headers were just, you know, hanging below the truck, and I didn't have exhaust yet, but the thing is just cackling like crazy. It's like, man, that's pretty awesome. And it's a relatively small cam, you know, compared to some of the bigger cams out there. But yeah, that truck ran real good. It ran hard. So that little 318 put in some work for me over the years.
How long did you have it?
I think I had that truck. It was probably around 8 years or so, 9 years. Yeah. It went, yeah, I went through quite a bit with that truck.
And clearly it was on the outer ring of the circle, and that's why you don't have it.
Unfortunately. Yeah, unfortunately. Well, you know, back then, dude, I mean, even though $300 was a lot of money back then, it was just, Dodge trucks were way more worthless back then than they are today.
Shh, don't say that.
Oh, sorry. For all those guys shopping, that's good. For the sellers, that's bad.
So how many tin grills have you had?
So I had that one. I had my 79, which I was taking to the track and playing with.
Was that the purple one?
That was the other purple one.
How many purple ones have you had?
2.
Okay.
So I had, the Power Wagon, when I pulled the motor out the first time, I had jammed it all plum crazy purple. You know, I was going to go purple on this thing because I just really loved that color. And it was pretty cool because it was like, dude, you stand out in a Power Wagon, a plum crazy purple Power Wagon.
Oh yeah.
It's like, you know, everybody knows who you are. I had jammed it. I got the motor running in it and stuff. Then I primered the whole truck. And then later on, me and my buddy, we're out there like outside, you know, bugs flying all over the place and just painting the thing plum crazy purple, you know. And it wasn't a great paint job, but it's still, for me, it was perfect for what I was doing because it was just a Thrasher truck anyways, you know.
So you had a Power Wagon and you had a 2-wheel drive that you took to the track.
Yes, and then I had the 76, which used to be my buddy Dennis's truck, and then I bought it, and then he bought it back, and then I bought it back, and then he's got it now. And then I have the Power Wagon I have now, which is a 79 4x4. And the parts truck, we won't count, but 4 or 5. And then I had a 76. I think it was a 6 or 7. Had the verticals in the grill,
Oh, yeah.
side markers or turn signals. And I sold that to my friends in Denmark. So
In Denmark?
yeah. I have some friends from Denmark. They're huge gearheads. So
Really?
the Andersons, yeah, Fleming and Charlotte. So if
So
they're
there's
out
a
there,
tin grill in Denmark right now. A
there
Jonny
is.
Mopar
Oh,
tin grill.
there's a Jonny Mopar tin grill, but there's also my buddy Ed Black had a 73, I think, long bed, 2-wheel drive with a 400 in it, and they bought that truck too. So they have
wow.
there's at least 2 tin grills out there.
Wow. I've never, that's one thing I'll say about talking Mopars is I get a lot of messages from people in other countries, and the Mopar followings in those other countries, I mean, they're just as loyal as here. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it. Especially Australia they're really huge about Mopars because they have all those crazy Mopars that you don't see in the States that we didn't get.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. I want to dive deeper more into that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
I
try
think
to
you're
bring.
gonna be.
I need an Aussie
You
to come
start
on the
hitting
show.
on. Yeah. Hit all these genres. I mean, you've got a lifetime supply of shows, I think.
Yeah, between the crazy Valiants and stuff that they got down under, and Brazil, they have those crazy Chargers that are like A bodies, but they have like little subtle, hints of the Charger, like the window in the back and the grills on those things. They're awesome.
Yeah.
If I could find a way to import one of those Chargers to the United States, I would absolutely love to do that. I just don't know how to go about it. I'm gonna have to look into it because they're just so cool. The first time I saw one, I was like, "What in the hell is that?" And then I'm like, "Charger? What the hell?" And and they have so many. The variations of models that they have in other parts of the world is it's crazy. So I can't wait to dive into that because I really know nothing about them. I mean, a little bit, but I just think it's pretty cool that they carried a lot of that. 67 through 69 A body, like Dart specifically body style, through like the late 70s or the mid to late 70s, which is crazy to me. Like one of them I saw was a 76, and I was like, gosh, that if you showed that to somebody that really wasn't too into the Mopar world, and you said, oh, there's a 69 Dodge Dart, it's customized, they probably wouldn't even question you. That's how similar they are. So they're pretty cool. But back to your tin grills. So you sold a couple to some guys in Denmark, or you sold yours and your buddy sold his. You've posted pictures of the 2-wheel drive, the purple one that you took to the track. I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to know more about that.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I was on Classic Car Trader, I think is where that one popped up, and it was just a bone stock height, but it was a short bed, D100 out in, I think it's called Anza. I think it was out in Anza out here. So it's sort of like out in the hills, it's very rural where that is. So I go out there. I think the guy was asking like $1,200, and it had 7-inch rims or 6.5-inch rims on it, so they're a little wider,
Okay.
And then it had dog dish hubcaps on it. Nice. The rims were painted silver. It was a very grandpa-looking truck, but and it had a rack on it. So again, somebody was using this truck to work with. So I drive out there, and I offered the guy $1,000, and I bought it for $1,000 and drove it back. My buddy was just like, "What are you doing buying this fucking thing?" Oh, sorry for the F-bomb. You're gonna have to. I'm trying not to cuss so much too, but I just keep loose
Johnny,
tongue.
I bite my tongue every episode. Trust me. You guys would be surprised if you saw what I edited out of my podcast when I'm by myself. I should put together a blooper reel. I think that would be pretty funny because I say some outlandish stuff. But
your podcast is really an hour long, but you had to cut it down to a half hour.
Sometimes that actually does happen. Sometimes I'll be talking about project car of the week, and I'll be like talking good about it, and then I'll just go off on this trail and go, you know what, actually this is a piece of shit, I don't even know. And then I realize, what am I doing here? So I back off and I just delete that, and I go back and I'm like, nah, we can't be that hard on these cars. But hey, with that tin grill, what, it wasn't purple when you got it?
No, it was brown.
Oh, okay.
It was brown. It had missing trim on it, and even back then you couldn't. They had so many variations of the trim on those trucks. It's not like you could go to the boneyard. If you did, you would find one that didn't have your trim. It had the other trim, you know. So I just took all the trim off of it and ground all the rivets off of it, other studs or whatever. And yeah, I remember I had I think this was around 2000. Well, I should back up. I got my buddy John Jones, who used to own General Mayhem before me, right? And he dropped the truck for me. So he did the axle flip in the back, and he had cut the springs up front, and you know, he actually lowered, or he shortened the lower control arms to get the wheels straight. So it was fine as long as the truck was going straight, but it really did screw up the geometry, because when that truck would go around a corner, forget it. It was sketchy. So I never would go fast cornering. It was just straight. But my buddy got me into drag racing down there at Qualcomm in San Diego, and I had just bought a '02 quad cab Dodge, you know, big truck, behemoth, and I was like, well, you know, I'll take that first. And it went like, I think it was 11 seconds in the eighth, which is crazy slow,
Sure.
you know. But even doing that, like my first time racing, you know, you're all nervous and like jittery and stuff. And then I started bringing the truck out, and I'd play with the truck, and I would, you know, do little tweaks to it. It's like, all right, let me ditch the front bumper to get it lighter. Let me get rid of the sway bar up front. Let me, you know, I took the rear tire out at one point, but I think it did better with the tire in, the extra weight in the back, you know. I put drag shocks on it, competition engineering, adjustable shocks, like 90-10s up front, and what are they, 70-30s in the back. But yeah, the truck was, it was a 360 with 318 heads on it. So the thing was like a torque monster. So out of the hole, like this truck would just torque up. I mean, the shocks being loose up front and squatting in the back, the thing would just come out of the hole like it was crazy fast, you know. It was very intimidating. It looked way more wicked than it was. And then it would just, you know, 60 foot, it would fall flat on its face, because the heads were just had small ports, you know, 318s. So, but I had a lot of fun with that. And that at Qualcomm, it was just mostly street cars. There was some race cars, but mostly street cars. So you could go there, have a good time, and you kind of start to figure out pretty quick like who's in your ballpark, and then you guys kind of congregate and start, hey man, you want to race, you know. So
like grudge racing type stuff.
Yeah. And I think I might have told the story online or on Facebook, but yeah, there was one day I was there, and there was this guy with a swept line, and he had a 440 in it. And I asked if he wanted to race, and he's like, no. He didn't want to race me because he was so intimidated by how my truck would launch. It looked freaking crazy, you know. The left would lift up. The tire didn't come off the ground, but you could just see the front left corner of the truck is just like in the sky, you know, and the right rear corner of the truck is just squatting. And when I had the spare tire under the bed, there's like this long stud, you know, there's that strap that goes underneath the spare tire, and there's a stud that goes through it. And then that stud, because the truck was so low, it would hit the ground and throw sparks. So it just looked crazy, you know. So he wouldn't race me. And then his mom was there, because he was a young guy. Of course, I was younger back then too, but his mom comes by, and she's like, oh, that's my son in that white Dodge truck. You guys should race. And I go, I asked him to race. I go, that'd be pretty cool. She's like, yeah, it'd be cool. 2 Dodges going down the track. And I'm like, yeah, tell him I'll race him, if he wants to do it. So she had to twist his arm to get him to race me.
Tell him to grow a set of balls and get out there.
Right. So we get out there, and I was cutting pretty good lights back then, especially there. It's like when you have just general public people out there, they cut terrible lights, and I think with the intimidation, he was a little intimidated and nervous, but I dropped a perfect light. Just boom. And so I tree him big time, right? And I get like, I'd say at least a half a truck length on him before he finally, is moving. So about 60 foot or so, I'm done. I have no top end, no more horsepower. The thing was making like 300 horse. So it was all out of the hole. And then after that, it was just, you're just cruising to the finish line. It sounds good, but it's just not making tons of power. Well, his 440, he's just starting to come alive now. And then he's just pulling me in. So we get to the finish line and I take him by like a bumper. I mean, it is a sliver. I beat him. So it was like, we get back and I'm like, yeah, I took him out, everybody's high-fiving you and stuff. And it was pretty awesome. It was pretty epic, and then, cause it was a close race, you know, and, he wanted a rematch. And I said, yeah, sure. I'll rematch you. And then of course, now he knew how fast his truck was compared to mine. He knew he was faster than me.
So he left on the yellow. He left on yellow.
He did. He got a much better light the second time around, and then he beat me by like a fender. So, yeah.
Well, that's good. But you may have changed that kid's life right there.
Maybe
he might still be racing today, going, one time this guy called me out.
I know. He's on the top fuel circuit now. Right?
Oh God! Could you imagine his mom going up to him like, "Don't be such a pussy. Get out there." Oh God! Do you need me to drive it for you?
Right.
And then he loses, and he's like, "Damn it, Mom! I told you."
See?
And then she forced him to go back out. She's like, "Leave on the last yellow."
Right.
That's
calm
funny.
Down.
That is funny. So that truck was your first vehicle that you were taking to the track, aside from your O2, but that was what got you into drag racing?
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And it was just the street race stuff, like the Friday nights, test and tune or legal street racing, that kind of thing.
So Qualcomm, was it a legit track, or was it something they set up on the weekends?
No.
Or tell me about that. I'm trying to envision it in my head.
It used to be the San Diego Chargers used to play football there. It's like a really old football stadium. I think they were long gone. They moved, I don't know if they went to a different stadium in San Diego and then before they left San Diego. But, and I want to say the Padres the baseball team played there as well. But they would do all kinds. It was just like a place you'd do a lot of events at, and they would set up the parking lot on the side of on the side of the stadium, basically. So you were racing the main street in front of it is called Friars Road. You were racing towards Friars Road, and the shutdown area where you'd actually be kind of going uphill towards that road. So it's kind of nice to slow you down. But the track sucked. I mean, it was not
like a no prep type thing.
Yeah, like was totally no prep. Wow. Yeah, totally. So, did I talk about my Roadrunner? How it ran? When I ran my Roadrunner there, it would run an 8.6 in the 8th. And then when I took the car to Qualcomm, didn't do any changes to it. It ran an 8.1.
Yeah,
so it was like a half second. Yeah,
I think you were saying something about that. When we were talking
so that
about you racing that thing.
Tells you the difference between the track quality. I mean, my car had problems with hooking up anyways, but definitely the track was a big factor.
Interesting.
But yeah, so back to the Power Wagon. So let's see. I've got the motor in it. I painted it plum crazy purple. It was just like one of those things. It's like one of those life trucks, it kind of teaches you about life, I guess. I remember driving one day and I lost the brakes on that truck. Like this is the old school woes that we used to go through way back in the day. It doesn't seem like new cars have these kinds of issues, like people don't drive, they don't put their lives in the hands of their vehicles, or maybe they do, but the vehicles are just so much more safer nowadays than back then. But I remember driving this thing and coming up to an intersection, and there's like 3 cars stacked up, to the light, and I'm hitting the brakes and there is nothing there.
Oh God.
Brakes are gone, and I'm probably at least doing like 50 or 55 or so. I'm like, holy crap. I mean, that scares the crap out of you when you have 0 brakes and there's a stopped car in front of you. So I'm like pumping and pumping, and it's starting to slow a little bit, but the brakes are not grabbing. So I had to throw the truck into the ditch. I went into a ditch and through a barbed wire fence, scratched the whole side of the truck up, and then, yeah, had to clean my shorts, and then basically limp the thing home at like 20 miles an hour so that, I couldn't get into too much trouble. I can stop the thing or peel off the road if I had to. And then there was another time the brakes were good, but this truck was drum brakes all the way around. And
so it stopped really good. So it stopped really good.
It did okay, but there was this, and this kind of segues into my buddy's truck. My buddy, my good friend Eric, he had bought a 74 Power Wagon, and it was like black primer. So the trucks were like very similar to each other. His was lifted. He had a big old like Dukes of Hazzard push bar on the front of his truck, this big old battering ram looking thing. But we were going to this party out in Nowanga. It was sort of like it's like a big open area, and my other buddy Todd had the idea of like, let's set up some volleyball nets between the 2 trucks. So we like built these, 2x4s or whatever sticking out of the beds of the truck and put a volleyball net between them. It was kind of cool. But those guys were already there. I was meeting up with them, and I'd never been out there before. And it's like the roads are very hilly and windy and stuff, So I'm driving through there and not thinking anything of it, because I've never, other than losing the brakes, I never had any problems with stopping the truck, Going through there, and you're having to work the brakes, hitting corners, hitting hills, all this and that. And there's a Jeep in front of me, and these guys were like just sort of sightseeing, out for a Sunday drive type of thing. And they're going down this hill, and I'm coming in behind them, and I'm hitting the brakes, and the brakes went through total brake fade. They were engaging. I could feel it. My foot's on the pedal, and I could feel the pressure, but the truck was not stopping. And I mean, I'm like, holy shit. I wasn't even tailgating them, but they were going so slow. And it was to that moment where you just like, I'm going to hit them. Like, we're going to touch. It's going to be impact, right? And the guy looks at his rearview mirror and sees me and then floors it. He actually got out of my way.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, thank God.
Wow.
Whew. And so after that, I slowed way down. They ended up going to the same party, and they were like, they came over because we had the truck set up and playing volleyball and stuff, and they came over and they're like, hey, you were behind us coming down the hill. We were in the Jeep. And I go, man, I'm sorry. I was not trying to tailgate you or anything. And they're like, oh no, we figured you probably had brake fade or something, and we figured we better get the hell out of your way. So it was pretty funny. But yeah, we would screw around. We would my buddies and I, because where we're at now, it's more populated now than it was in the 90s. It was more rural back then. It's sort of rural now, but it's way rural back then. So we would, load up with beer and stuff like that, go out to the hills and go 4-buying and, do stupid stuff. And I remember with that 340 cam in that truck, and we were hauling just, whoop, I mean, fun, way fun, and came over the crest of this hill, and the truck was so big, like it was so high, when you're kind of going up and over, you can't see over the hood. It's like I have no idea what's on the other side. So come up and over the other side, and there was a rut that had opened up, and it was sort of like you go up and down. So from the rain, this rut had developed, and it was huge, and the left front tire just fell into it. And I remember I'm holding the steering wheel, and the steering wheel just spun in my hands. Like it yanked it. There was no stopping it. It's like, holy crap. The truck comes to a rest. The left rear tire, because the truck is like this, the left rear tire is completely off the ground by 6 inches to a foot.
Oh man.
And I'm like, oh shit, how do we get out of here, right? I should say, because the truck's a 4x4. So one of the problems with my truck was it leaked oil really bad. I don't remember if it was the pan or the rear main, but it would leak oil, and right where it would drip down, it would hit the front drive shaft to the front differential, and the oil would wash out the grease out of the bearings, and it would tear up the U-joint.
Yeah.
So I got tired. I changed it a couple of times, and it's like, man, it's wiping it out so fast. I just left it out. So I basically had this lifted truck that was a 2-wheel drive. So here we are stuck with the left rear tire off the ground, no 4-wheel drive. Like, shit, what are we going to do? So I'm in the truck, we get out, we're looking at it, and all right, we got to get into the truck and put some weight on that side, and then I'm going to punch it and try to get out. And my buddy Todd had climbed up that tire, and he was standing on, because the easiest way to get in the bed of the truck was up the tires, right? You just step on the rim, and you step on top of the tire, and then you go over the bed. So he's standing on the tire, and he said, whatever you do, don't punch it. But all I heard was punch it. So he's standing on this tire. Boom! I punch it. He goes flying. My other buddy Scott is like, whoa, 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 stop. So I'm like, what? You just launched Todd that way,
You just killed Todd. You killed Todd.
Yeah, I just killed Todd. So he's all pissed off because he's laying in the dirt now, I'm just like, sorry, man, I thought you said punch it. He goes, no, I said don't punch it. So that was one of the nights. And it bent the rims, so we're driving back like clunk, 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 all the way home. There was some other night we got flat tires out there, and man, it was crazy because the truck was pretty loud, and I think the collector gaskets probably blew out on it, and I just drove it anyways, and we get these flat tires, and I limp the truck home. We get home in like, I want to say half hour to an hour later or something like that. Some guy's knocking on my buddy's door, right? Like, what the hell? So we go outside, and this guy is there with a freaking, I think it was a shotgun. And he's got his wife, and he's got his daughter. And he's like, what were you guys doing out there on my property? And we're what the hell? Yeah.
Oh, no.
Like, no, we were just out buying and got a flat tire. So the tire was so, it was flat, and it would leave on the dirt ground. Like, it would kind of leave this trail, so it was obvious where you could just follow that, and it took you all the way to the truck, which was in, next to my buddy's house. So it was like, holy shit, this guy has got a freaking shotgun. He's threatening us. And he's like, you guys stay off my property, blah, 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 And I didn't know it at the time, but my buddy, he had a gun. He had a gun in his back, and he was like, he said, dude, if he pulled up on that shotgun, he's like, I was going to shoot his ass. But he never did. He always kept it kind of like pointed to his side, Yeah. And then it turns out my buddy Todd knew the girl, like they went to high school together, and he was like, I don't remember her name, but is that you, such and such? And she's like, yeah. And, and it's like, he's like, look, I know your daughter, and like, we're not screwing around, we're not stealing stuff or, whatever, we're just out for buying. And the guy finally calmed down, but I think he was a tweaker. I think he was like on
Oh God.
something and is just like super paranoid that, people are coming through their property. And the truck was so loud. So I was probably really far from his house, but it sounded much closer because the truck was so loud. And then you're out in the hills, like sound carries pretty far out there, So that was a
Gosh.
that was a crazy night,
How about
you
all the
know.
times you knocked on doors to buy cars? You never
Right?
had a shotgun pulled on you, and you
I
have a
haven't.
shotgun just trying to have some fun, trying to kill my buddy Todd.
Yeah, exactly,
Oh, that's funny.
exactly.
God, that's crazy, man. So
Yeah, it was that.
out of those tin girls, the one you took to the track and the one you went wheeling with, which one was funner? Which one did you like more?
Oh man, that's a tough question
I know.
because they
Because
were.
I asked the
Yeah,
tough
that's
questions
why
here on
you asked
Talking
it.
Mopars.
Wow. I, you know, I can't answer that. Honestly, they are. I had so much fun with both trucks at opposite ends of the spectrum. I
Sure.
mean, it was just totally different experiences. And then, with the Power Wagon, my age, I was really young, and we were doing stupid stuff. Like I said, we'd get drunk and go out there. We would drink and go out into the hills and just go thrash on the truck, and have a good time. Uh, and the drag racing with the lowered one was just a whole different kind of fun. So, and I was older when I did that. So it's like if you had reversed them, I probably wouldn't appreciate them as much. So I don't know. I would probably say if I had to pick, if you forced me, I'm gonna go with the Power Wagon.
Yeah.
It's probably more fun, more epic.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll get right into the big story.
Yes,
It
I was gonna ask you about this, but I wanted you to lead us there. So go ahead.
Yeah, I think we're there. I think we're there now. It's time.
Thanks for joining Jonny Mopar and I today on the show for part 1. Part 2 will be out next week, so be on the lookout for that. I know I left you at a cliffhanger. The next story is crazy. I can't wait for you guys to hear that, so tune in next week. It's always a great time talking Mopars with Jonny, as usual. I did want to address a couple things before we go. On Friday, just before Jonny and I started recording, I dropped a post on the Mopar Hunter Facebook page giving listeners a chance to drop a question or comment in the comments section of the post, and Jonny and I would address it on the show. Well, we had two, and one was posted while we were actually recording, and the other came shortly after we wrapped up. So I wanted to let the two guys who dropped us a line know that the questions will be answered on part 2 of this installment of Direct Connections next week. I'll be answering Michael Irwin's question by myself since it came in after Jonny and I wrapped up, and Josh Turner's question was addressed on the show, but I found a more definitive answer after we recorded, so I'll talk about that during the wrap-up as well. Before we shut her down this week, I wanted to let you guys know that the next round of voting for the Build Mopar project is here. And this time around, we are voting on who will be building the 426 cubic inch stroker 3rd generation Hemi for the 1968 Dodge Dart Superstock Modern Hemi tribute car that Hemi Pages is calling the Dart Pack. Some of the best engine builders in the game are amongst this round's choices, and they are Arrington Performance, MMX, BES Racing Engines, Opel Engineering, Hughes Engines, and Prestige Motorsports. So be sure to head on over to buildmopar.com and vote today. There you have it, my friends. Another episode of Talking Mopars Direct Connections is in the books. For more information about this podcast or to listen and subscribe to the show, please visit talkingmopars.com. And don't forget that you can send me your stories, questions, comments, complaints, suggestions, and everything else on your Mopar addicted mind to Chris at talkingmopars.com, or leave me a voice message on my voice mailbox at 209-28-MOPAR to hear yourself on the show. Before we go, I want to tell you about a great way to help support this show, and that's by picking up some merch in the Talking Mopars merch shop. Not only are you going to get some cool swag, but you're also helping me out to keep this show running. So if you'd like to help support the show, jump on over to talkingmopars.com and head on over to the store and click Visit the Shop. That's it, my friends. Until we talk again for part 2 with Jonny Mopar, I am your host, Chris Albrecht, and that was Talking Mopars, Direct Connections.
Thank you for listening to Talking Mopars, your direct connection to all things Mopar. Until next time, remember, no Mopar left behind.